The day had started like any other, with the sun shining gently through the curtains of their small apartment. The mother woke her son early that morning, telling him they had to hurry because it was a special day. They were taking a flight to visit family who lived far away. For her, air travel was always a little nerve-wracking, but for her son it felt like an adventure. At just 8 years old, his eyes sparkled with excitement as he carefully packed his backpack with his favorite book, a small notebook, and a few pencils. He wanted to write down everything he saw on the journey. The mother moved around their home with care, double-checking tickets and IDs, worrying about making it on time. She was the kind of person who always wanted everything to go smoothly. She dressed neatly, with a gentle smile on her face, but anyone who looked closely could see the tension in her eyes. Traveling alone with a child could be tiring, and she hoped for nothing more than a peaceful trip. Her son noticed her worry but didn't say anything. He simply tried to stay cheerful, chatting about the airplane they would ride and the clouds they would see. When they reached the airport, the boy's curiosity only grew. He looked around at the tall ceilings, the busy people rushing from one place to another, and the rows of glowing screens showing flight numbers. He held his mother's hand tightly but couldn't stop asking questions. "Why do they check our bags so many times?" he asked. His mother smiled patiently, explaining each step as best she could. Though her own heart beat faster every time they went through a line, she made sure he felt calm and safe. After the usual checks and long walks through hallways, they finally reached their gate. The boy pressed his face to the wide glass windows, watching airplanes roll slowly across the runway. To him, they looked like giant birds getting ready to take off into the sky. He could hardly wait for his turn. When boarding began, he and his mother joined the line, quietly moving forward until they reached the airplane door. The flight attendants greeted them warmly, and the boy grinned back, already imagining the adventure ahead. They found their seats near the middle of the plane. The mother helped him put his backpack under the seat, then settled in beside him with a sigh of relief. Around them, passengers shuffled bags, fixed their jackets, and prepared for the long flight. The boy peeked over the seat in front of him, waved shyly at a little girl, and then sat back down. Everything seemed calm and ordinary, but ordinary moments often change quickly. Just before the plane doors closed, another passenger walked down the aisle, looking for his seat. He carried a large bag and seemed rushed, almost irritated. When he reached their row, he stopped, frowned, and spoke sharply about the space. The mother looked up politely, trying to explain that she and her son were already settled. The man insisted he had been given the wrong seat. His voice grew louder than it needed to be, and other passengers began to notice. The mother tried her best to remain calm, but it was not easy. She explained softly that she was sitting where her ticket directed, showing her boarding pass to him. Instead of easing, the man's words became more pointed, as if he doubted her. The boy's smile faded, his small hands tightening on his seatbelt as he watched. He saw the look on his mother's face, how her kind eyes lowered, how her voice trembled a little even though she kept trying to explain. He had seen that look before in different moments of life, when people treated her unfairly for no good reason. The passengers nearby glanced at one another. Some raised eyebrows, some whispered, but no one stepped in yet. The mother gave another nervous smile, trying to keep peace, but inside she was growing smaller under the stranger's sharp words. She didn't want to cause trouble. She only wanted to reach her family safely, with her son beside her. The boy's heart began to beat faster. He felt something stir inside him, not fear, but a strong need to help. He was only 8, yet he had always been thoughtful beyond his years. He loved reading about people who stood up for what was right. At home, he often read stories about lawyers, judges, and people who used words instead of anger to solve problems. Sometimes his uncle, who studied law, told him little things about rights and fairness. The boy had listened closely, storing those words in his mind even if no one expected him to remember. Now, sitting in the middle of an airplane row, he realized his mom needed someone to stand with her. She needed a voice that was clear and steady. His small hands unclipped the seatbelt, and before his mother could stop him, he stood up tall on the seat cushion. His head barely reached the shoulders of the adults around him, but his presence drew sudden attention. His eyes, bright and serious, looked directly at the passenger who had spoken so harshly. The cabin seemed to pause. The low hum of passengers placing their bags, the click of seatbelts, even the announcements overhead, all faded for a moment. The boy took a deep breath, his chest rising with courage far larger than his small frame. Though his voice was not loud, it carried clearly in the quiet space. "Sir," he began, his words calm, "my mom is sitting in the right seat. She showed you her ticket. That means this seat belongs to her." The mother's eyes widened in shock, her hand half reaching to gently pull him back down, but she froze when she heard the firmness in his voice. The man blinked, caught off guard. He opened his mouth to reply, but the boy continued, speaking slowly and politely. "On a plane, every passenger has a ticket. The ticket tells us where to sit. It is a rule. If there is a mistake, we can ask the flight attendant to check. But no one should raise their voice at another passenger, especially not at my mom." Several heads turned fully toward the row now, curious to hear this young child speaking like an adult. Whispers traveled through the nearby seats, but the boy didn't notice. His eyes stayed steady, his voice careful, as though he had practiced this many times in his imagination. He wasn't rude. He wasn't loud. He was simply clear, using logic that even grown-ups could not deny. The mother's heart pounded in her chest. She had always known her son was bright, but she never expected him to step forward like this in such a public place. A mix of fear and pride washed over her. She wanted to protect him from attention, yet she also felt deeply moved that he wanted to protect her. The man shifted uneasily, his sharpness softening as he glanced around and realized that other passengers were watching closely. He had expected to win an argument with a quiet woman, not to be calmly challenged by an 8-year-old who spoke of fairness like it was second nature. He muttered something under his breath, but his words had lost their earlier force. The boy, noticing the hesitation, added one last sentence with surprising confidence. "My mom has the same rights here as anyone else. If something is wrong, we can ask kindly, but it's not fair to blame her when she is just sitting in her seat." Silence hung for a second, then shifted into soft murmurs of agreement from nearby passengers. Some nodded, some smiled. The mother closed her eyes for a moment, a tear sliding down her cheek, not from embarrassment but from pride so strong it filled her heart. Her little boy had just stood up for her with wisdom beyond his years. The flight attendant, alerted by the raised voices, arrived at their row just in time to hear the last words. She checked the tickets quickly and confirmed that the mother and son were in the correct seats. The man, now red-faced, adjusted his bag and moved to the seat he had been assigned. The tension in the row loosened, the hum of the airplane returning as if nothing unusual had happened. But for the mother and her son, everything had changed. As the engines prepared to roar, she reached for her son's hand and squeezed it gently. He looked up at her with his innocent smile as though he had only done what anyone should do. She whispered softly, "Thank you," her voice breaking with emotion. He leaned back against his seat, calm again, ready to see the clouds outside the window. The plane had not yet left the ground, but in that moment, the mother felt as if they were already flying. The boy sat back down after speaking, and for a moment he felt the thump of his heartbeat in his chest. He wasn't sure if his words had been enough, but he knew he had to say something for his mom. His mother brushed his hair gently with her hand, her eyes filled with emotion. She didn't know whether to smile, laugh, or cry. All she knew was that her little boy had just done something she never expected. He looked up at her, not searching for praise, but simply to make sure she was all right. The hum of the engines grew louder as the plane prepared for takeoff. People around them whispered quietly, but many were smiling in their direction. The boy noticed it, but he tried not to let it distract him. He wasn't seeking attention. He only wanted things to be fair for his mom. The passenger who had spoken harshly earlier was now silent, his head slightly turned toward the window. The tension had cooled, but the boy could still feel the weight of many eyes on him. As the plane began to roll down the runway, he thought about what had just happened. He didn't plan to stand up like that. It had come naturally, almost as if the words were waiting inside him for the right moment. He remembered how his uncle once told him that laws and rules exist to protect people, and that no one is too small or too young to care about what is right. He had listened closely that day, even though the adults thought he was only half paying attention. Now those words felt like tools in his hands. The mother leaned closer to him as the plane lifted into the sky. "You didn't have to do that, baby," she whispered softly. "But I'm so proud of you." Her voice trembled and her eyes glistened. The boy gave a small shrug, almost shy, and replied, I just didn't want them to talk to you like that. It wasn't fair. His words were so simple, yet they carried the weight of something far greater. Once the plane leveled out and the seatbelt sign turned off, the boy pulled his backpack onto his lap. He took out his small notebook, flipping through the pages filled with scribbles and little drawings. Some pages had copied lines from books he loved to read. He had once written the phrase, "Justice means fairness for everyone," in big, uneven letters. Looking at it now, he smiled quietly. He may not have known all the complicated words lawyers used, but he understood the heart of it. A woman sitting across the aisle leaned forward with a kind smile. "Young man," she said softly so as not to disturb others, "the way you spoke just now, it was very impressive. You sounded wiser than your age." The boy blushed and quickly looked down at his notebook, unsure how to respond. His mom answered for him with a polite thank you, though inside she felt a rush of pride again. The flight attendants began moving down the aisle with carts of drinks and snacks. One of them stopped at their row, crouched slightly, and spoke gently to the boy. "You did very well back there," she said. "You reminded everyone to stay calm and be respectful. Not many adults could have done that as clearly as you did." The boy's cheeks grew warmer, but he smiled politely. He didn't feel like a hero. He only felt like a son who wanted to protect his mom. As he sipped a small cup of juice, his mind kept replaying the earlier moment. He thought about how quickly people can forget kindness when they are upset, and how easy it is for one raised voice to make another person feel small. He didn't like seeing his mom shrink under someone else's anger. That thought stayed with him, making him sit a little taller in his seat. The mother, meanwhile, studied her son quietly. She knew he was bright. He had always asked thoughtful questions, read books beyond his age, and listened to conversations even when adults assumed he wasn't paying attention. But she had never imagined he would gather that knowledge and courage to use it in real life, especially in a crowded airplane. Her heart swelled with both gratitude and amazement. As the hours of the flight passed, the boy's mind wandered back to his love for stories. He remembered the times he sat by the window at home, reading children's versions of famous speeches and stories of lawyers who stood up in court. Though the language was simple, the ideas were big. He loved the thought that words could change how people behaved, that words could defend those who couldn't defend themselves. And now, in his own small way, he had done the same. Another passenger, an older gentleman sitting behind them, leaned forward later in the flight. "Son," he said with a gentle smile, "have you ever thought about becoming a lawyer one day? You'd be good at it." The boy tilted his head, considering the question seriously. "Maybe," he replied. "I like reading about laws. They make sense to me. It's like rules in a game. If everyone follows them, things are fair." His answer made the man chuckle softly, nodding in agreement. The mother watched this exchange with quiet wonder. She thought about how children often see the world more clearly than adults. Where adults complicate things, children can see fairness in simple terms. Her son didn't speak with anger or pride, he spoke with truth. And that truth had touched people in ways she hadn't expected. The passenger who had caused the issue earlier eventually turned toward the boy. His expression had softened, his tone calmer. "Kid," he muttered, though with less sharpness than before, "you're pretty smart. I guess I was too quick to argue. Sorry about that." The boy gave a small nod, not with arrogance but with the same politeness he had shown before. "Thank you, sir," he said simply. Those 3 words carried more weight than a long speech could have. From then on, the rest of the flight felt different. The cabin, which had once been filled with tension, now carried a quiet sense of respect. People seemed lighter, even warmer with one another. The boy returned to drawing in his notebook, sketching clouds and little airplanes. His mom leaned back in her seat, finally able to relax, though she kept stealing glances at her son with a soft smile. Time passed, and the sun began to set outside the window, painting the clouds in shades of orange and pink. The boy pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering softly, "It looks like a painting." His mother nodded, resting her hand gently on his shoulder. For a while they both sat in silence, simply enjoying the view. What no one could see in that quiet moment was how deeply the experience had shaped both of them. For the boy, it was proof that even someone small could make a difference if they spoke with honesty and courage. For the mother, it was a reminder that her son's heart and mind were growing in ways far beyond his years. The world might not always be fair, but with her son beside her, she felt hope. As the cabin lights dimmed and passengers prepared to rest, whispers still floated here and there about the remarkable boy in row 18. Some called him brave, some called him wise, but for him, he didn't need titles or attention. He only cared about one thing, that his mom felt safe, respected, and at peace. And in that simple wish, his brilliance truly shined. The soft glow of the cabin lights made everything feel calmer, but inside the boy's heart something still stirred. He had defended his mother, and though the moment had passed, the memory of it remained alive. He didn't feel proud in the way people might expect. He simply felt that he had done what was right. Yet he noticed how people continued to glance at him from time to time, curious, surprised, and even impressed. The flight had reached a steady rhythm. Some passengers leaned back with their eyes closed, trying to sleep. Others opened laptops or flipped through magazines. The boy, however, kept replaying his words in his mind. He thought carefully about each sentence he had spoken. He wondered if he had said too much or maybe not enough. But then he remembered the way his mom had looked at him, her eyes wide with pride, her hand squeezing his softly, and he knew it had been worth it. His mother leaned closer, whispering, "You were so calm when you spoke. Where did you learn to do that?" The boy shrugged, his small shoulders lifting. "I just remembered what Uncle always says about rules. Rules are to keep things fair. I only explained it." The mother shook her head gently, smiling. "You didn't just explain it. You made people listen. That's a gift." The boy's eyes lit up at that word, gift. He liked the thought that maybe his love for books and laws wasn't just something he kept inside his notebook. Maybe it was something he could share to help others. He had always enjoyed learning about how people solve problems with words instead of anger. Now he realized those lessons could actually make a difference, even on a plane high above the clouds. Just then, a flight attendant returned to their row. She crouched beside the boy again, her eyes kind. "You have quite a way with words," she said warmly. "When you spoke earlier, even the crew stopped to listen. You reminded everyone of respect." The boy looked down at his shoes, embarrassed by the attention. "I only wanted to help my mom," he said quietly. The attendant smiled. "That's the best reason of all." Nearby passengers nodded in agreement. A young man with headphones around his neck leaned over and said, "Kid, you spoke better than most adults I know. I study law at university, and even I couldn't have put it that clearly." The boy's eyes widened at the mention of law school. He had read about it in books, but hearing someone who actually studied law made it feel real. He tilted his head curiously. "What do you learn in law school?" he asked. The young man chuckled. "A lot of complicated stuff, but at the heart of it, it's about fairness, just like you said." The conversation caught the attention of others. People began asking the boy questions, not to test him, but out of genuine curiosity. "Do you like reading about the law?" one woman asked. He nodded eagerly. "Yes, I like stories about lawyers who help people. I like when someone explains rules so everyone understands." His words were simple, but his sincerity touched the listeners. They leaned back in their seats, smiling, as though they had just witnessed something rare. The mother sat quietly, letting her son shine. She knew he wasn't showing off. He was simply sharing what he truly cared about. She could see how his natural love for justice and fairness fascinated the people around them. For once, she didn't feel small or looked down upon. Instead, she felt lifted by the strength of her son's spirit. The man who had argued earlier still sat stiffly, but his eyes darted toward the boy now and then. His expression was complicated, part embarrassment, part respect. At last, he leaned slightly toward the mother and murmured, "Your son is remarkable. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I should have handled things differently." The mother nodded, accepting his words with grace. She didn't need him to say more. Her son's actions had already settled the matter. As the flight continued, the boy returned to his notebook. But instead of drawing, he began writing. His pencil moved quickly as though he didn't want to forget anything. He wrote about how words could change people's hearts, how standing up politely could be stronger than shouting. He wrote about his mom's smile and how it made him feel safe to speak. His handwriting was uneven, his sentences short, but the meaning behind them was clear. He was recording a lesson he would never forget. The plane sailed smoothly through the sky, stars beginning to appear outside the windows. The boy pressed his face against the cool glass, gazing at the twinkling lights above the clouds. He thought about how small he was in such a big world, yet how even small voices could matter. That idea made him feel both humble and strong. Later, as snacks were passed again, another conversation began between passengers who had overheard him. They started discussing fairness, kindness, and the importance of respect in public spaces. The boy listened quietly, realizing that his words had sparked something bigger. People weren't just entertained by what he said, they were thinking about it. They were reflecting on their own behavior. His mother leaned close once more, whispering, "Do you see what you've done? You made people kinder just by speaking the truth." The boy tilted his head thoughtfully. "I didn't make them kinder. They already were. Maybe they just needed to be reminded." His answer made her heart swell again. He saw goodness in people even when they forgot to show it. As hours passed, the cabin grew quiet. Many passengers dozed off, but the boy stayed awake, his notebook open on his lap. He wrote down new thoughts. Everyone has rights on a plane. No one should be treated unfairly. Words are stronger than anger. His mom glanced at the pages and smiled at the wisdom tucked inside such simple lines. She imagined how one day he might write much more, maybe even books of his own. When the pilot's voice came over the speaker, announcing the halfway point of the journey, the boy yawned and leaned against his mother. She wrapped her arm around him, holding him close. The earlier tension felt far away now, replaced by warmth and pride. The plane hummed steadily, a symbol of calm after the storm of voices. Even in sleep, the boy's face looked thoughtful. His mother watched him, whispering softly, "My little lawyer." She knew the world might one day challenge him, as it often does for those who dream big. But she also knew that his heart was strong and his voice was true. That combination, she believed, would carry him far. And though they were only halfway through their flight, it felt like the journey had already given them something far more valuable than reaching a destination. It had given them a story of a child's courage, a mother's pride, and the reminder that even in the most ordinary moments, greatness can shine. The plane continued to glide smoothly above the clouds, the gentle hum of the engines filling the cabin. The boy sat quietly, his notebook resting on his lap, though his mind was far from quiet. He kept thinking about the incident earlier, replaying the words he had spoken and the way people had listened. It was strange to feel so small in body, yet so big in impact. He realized that sometimes even a young voice could be heard clearly if it spoke with truth and calmness. His mother glanced at him, her eyes soft with pride. She could hardly believe what had just happened. A few hours ago, the tension in the aisle had been thick, and she had felt helpless. But now, watching her son quietly observe the cabin, she felt a wave of relief. Not only had he defended her, but he had done it with a grace and intelligence that left everyone around them impressed. She whispered softly, "You are extraordinary, my little one." But the boy only smiled and shook his head. For him, it was simply the right thing to do. The passengers around them seemed to have settled into a new rhythm. Some were chatting quietly, others were reading, and a few had dozed off. Yet the earlier events had left a mark. Many people kept glancing toward the boy, whispering to each other with looks of admiration. One elderly woman leaned toward her companion and said, "Did you hear that child? He spoke so clearly, like he's been studying the law for years." Her companion nodded, shaking his head in disbelief. The boy caught the whispers but didn't let it distract him. He was too focused on his mother, who sat beside him, relaxed now but still glancing at him with love and awe. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, distributing drinks and snacks, smiling as they passed by. One of them paused at their row again, crouching slightly to speak to the boy. "You know, it's not common to see someone your age handle a situation like that so well," she said kindly. "Most adults would have either gotten angry or quiet, but you stayed calm and explained things." The boy looked up at her and nodded politely. "I just wanted to make sure my mom was safe," he replied simply. His honesty touched her more than any compliment could. She smiled and moved on, leaving the boy feeling quietly proud, though he didn't fully understand why adults were so amazed by him. The boy's mind wandered back to all the times he had read about fairness and justice. He thought about stories from books he had borrowed from the library, stories about people who stood up for what was right. They were mostly adults, judges, and lawyers, but he realized that courage didn't belong to any age. It belonged to anyone willing to speak the truth and help others. Sitting in his seat, he felt a quiet determination grow inside him. One day he decided he would use that courage for even bigger challenges. As he looked around the cabin, He noticed small moments that had gone unnoticed before. Passengers were smiling at each other, some helping one another with bags and others quietly offering seats to elderly travelers. The boy understood that what he had done didn't just resolve a seating problem. It had reminded everyone of the importance of kindness and patience. It was a small thing, but even small things could ripple outward, changing how people behaved. His mother gently reached for his hand, holding it lightly. "You've done more than defend me, you know," she whispered. "You reminded everyone to be patient and respectful. That's a rare gift for anyone, let alone someone your age." The boy looked down at their hands and nodded. He didn't think of it as a gift. He thought of it as simply doing what was right. But hearing his mother say it made him feel warm inside, as if he had achieved something important beyond the moment. A few rows back, the passenger who had caused the initial tension earlier seemed thoughtful. He shifted in his seat, glancing toward the boy and his mother more than once. There was no anger in his expression now, only a quiet acknowledgement of what had occurred. Later, when the flight attendant checked on him, he muttered something about appreciating the boy's calm explanation. Though his words were low, the meaning was clear. He had learned something valuable from an 8-year-old he had underestimated. The boy returned to his notebook, flipping through pages filled with his thoughts, drawings, and quotes he liked from books. He wrote down what he had learned that day, that fairness mattered more than being right, that calm words were stronger than shouting, and that protecting someone you loved was more important than seeking attention. He wrote slowly, carefully, choosing each word. In those lines he captured not just an event, but a lesson he knew would stay with him forever. The sun began to set outside the windows, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold. The boy pressed his forehead against the glass, mesmerized by the view. He thought about how high they were, floating above the world, yet how connected they all were in small moments of understanding and respect. He thought about how people on the plane had listened, had reflected on his words, and how kindness could sometimes be the quietest but strongest power. The mother leaned closer to him and whispered, "Do you see? You didn't just protect me. You taught people in your own way something very important." The boy looked up, his eyes wide with thought. "I didn't teach them," he said softly. "I just reminded them." His mother smiled. She understood what he meant. Sometimes even a gentle reminder could change the course of an entire situation. As evening fell, the cabin lights dimmed, and passengers began settling in for the night. Some closed their eyes. Others continued quietly reading or drawing, but a gentle sense of calm filled the plane. The boy sat back, feeling tired but satisfied. He had faced a challenge, stood up for someone he loved, and learned that courage and calmness could leave a lasting impression. It was a feeling that filled him with quiet pride, the kind that didn't need applause or recognition. He looked at his mother once more. She smiled at him softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I can't tell you enough how proud I am," she whispered. "You've grown so much today." The boy simply nodded, resting his head against her shoulder. He felt her warmth, her love, and the safety of knowing that he had done something right. A flight attendant returned one more time, stopping to speak quietly to the boy. "You have a wonderful mind and a kind heart. Remember, using both together will take you far in life," she said gently. The boy nodded thoughtfully. He didn't fully understand the depth of her words, but he knew they meant something important. He wanted to be someone who could help others, just like the adults in the books he read, but with the calm and honesty he already felt inside. The remaining hours of the flight passed slowly but peacefully. The boy occasionally looked out the window, sketched clouds in his notebook, and whispered small thoughts to himself about fairness, courage, and kindness. He noticed passengers helping one another, offering smiles and treating each other with gentleness. He felt proud, not just for himself or his mother, but for the small changes he had helped create in the cabin. When the pilot announced the final descent, the boy felt a flutter of excitement. The journey had not only brought them closer to their destination, but it had also given him a new understanding of himself and the power of words. He realized that courage didn't always mean being loud or forceful. Sometimes it meant speaking clearly, calmly, and truthfully, even when others might doubt you. As the plane touched down, the boy looked around the cabin one last time. Passengers exchanged polite smiles, some whispered words of admiration, and a few nodded in quiet respect. His mother held his hand tightly, both of them sharing a moment of pride and relief. The journey was almost over, but the memories, lessons, and small acts of courage would stay with them forever. For the boy, this flight had become more than a trip. It had become a story of bravery, fairness, and love. And though he was only 8 years old, he had shown that even the smallest voice could have a big impact when spoken with honesty and heart. The plane began its final approach, and the boy pressed his face against the window, watching the city lights grow brighter below. He felt a mixture of excitement and relief. The journey had been long, but it had also been extraordinary. He glanced at his mother, who was sitting beside him, her hand lightly resting on his. She had not stopped smiling since the day had begun. He could see in her eyes the pride she felt, not just for what he had done, but for the kind, thoughtful person he was becoming. As the wheels touched the runway, a gentle cheer came from passengers who had been quietly observing the boy. It was subtle, but filled with warmth, a recognition of the courage and fairness he had shown earlier. The mother squeezed his hand and he smiled shyly. He didn't care about applause or attention. What mattered to him most was knowing that his mom felt safe, respected, and proud. He had given her that gift, and it filled his heart in a way nothing else could. Once the plane slowed and taxied to the gate, passengers began gathering their belongings. Some of them approached the boy and his mother, offering compliments and words of admiration. A woman with a kind face said, "Your son is remarkable. You must be very proud of him." The mother smiled, her eyes glistening. "I am. He is my greatest gift," she replied softly. The boy looked down, a little embarrassed by the praise, but also quietly happy. He didn't feel remarkable. He had only spoken the truth, but he realized that truth had a power he hadn't fully understood until now. The man who had caused the initial tension on the plane approached them as well. His face was softer now, his expression less sharp than before. "I want to apologize again," he said, looking directly at the boy. "You were right, and I let my frustration get the better of me. I hope you and your mother can forgive me." The boy nodded politely. "It's okay, sir," he said simply. The man's shoulders relaxed, and he offered a small smile before moving on. The boy realized that sometimes speaking the truth calmly could not only defend someone but also help others see their mistakes and change. As the passengers filed out of the plane, a flight attendant stopped to speak to the boy one last time. "You have a bright mind and a kind heart," she said. "Remember this feeling, and always use your words to help others. You'll go far in life if you do." The boy nodded thoughtfully. He didn't fully understand everything she meant, but he felt a quiet confidence inside him. The knowledge that he could make a difference, even in small ways, gave him a sense of purpose that felt stronger than anything he had experienced before. Walking through the airport, the boy held his mother's hand tightly. She guided him gently through the crowds, and he noticed how people turned to glance at him. Some smiling, some nodding in recognition. It was strange to feel noticed in such a way, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He understood now that what he had done mattered, not for attention, but because it reminded people of something important: fairness, respect, and the power of calm words. They reached the baggage claim, and while waiting for their luggage, several passengers approached them again. Some wanted to tell the mother how impressive her son had been. Others simply wanted to meet him and shake his hand. Each interaction made the boy smile quietly, though he didn't say much. He had learned that sometimes listening and observing was just as important as speaking. His mother gently squeezed his hand and whispered, "You have shown so much wisdom today. People will remember you for it." He nodded, feeling proud, but in a calm, quiet way. When their luggage arrived, the mother and son moved toward the exit. Outside, a warm breeze greeted them, carrying the sounds and lights of the city. Taxis and rideshare cars passed by, and families reunited with laughter and hugs. The mother turned to her son and whispered, "Do you realize what you did today? You didn't just protect me. You reminded everyone that kindness and fairness matter." The boy smiled, looking up at her with wide eyes. "I only wanted to make sure you were okay," he said. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he had learned. They walked through the terminal together, and several people waved or nodded at the boy, still impressed by his calm courage. A little girl tugged at her mother's hand and whispered, "That boy is amazing." The boy blushed slightly but didn't respond. He had no desire to be famous or noticed. He only cared that he had helped someone he loved. The mother looked at him with deep gratitude. She realized that her son's wisdom and courage were gifts not just for her, but for the world around him. Once outside, they approached a taxi waiting to take them to their family's home. The boy watched the city lights blur as they drove, thinking quietly about the journey. He thought about the lessons he had learned, that speaking the truth calmly could make people listen, that fairness and respect mattered more than winning arguments, and that protecting someone you loved was one of the most important things in life. He realized that even though he was only 8, he had the ability to make a difference in the world around him. During the ride, the mother glanced at her son, still amazed by what had happened on the plane. She gently said, "I want you to remember this day forever. You stood up for me and you did it with honesty and courage. Not everyone can do that." The boy looked out the window thoughtfully. "I'll remember," he said quietly. "But I didn't feel brave. I just felt like I had to do it." His mother smiled softly. She understood that true courage often feels ordinary to the person showing it, even if it seems extraordinary to everyone else. When they arrived at their family's home, relatives were waiting with warm hugs and excited chatter. The boy's mother introduced him, sharing the story of the plane ride. Everyone listened in awe as she described how her son had calmly defended her, using his knowledge of fairness and rules to stand up to an angry passenger. The boy watched quietly, feeling a mix of pride and embarrassment. He didn't like being the center of attention, but he was happy that his actions had helped his mother and made people see the importance of respect and kindness. Later, when the house had quieted down, the mother tucked her son into bed. She held him close for a long moment, whispering, "You made me proud today in a way I never imagined. You reminded me and everyone else that even small voices can do big things." The boy yawned, his eyes heavy but thoughtful. "I only wanted to make sure you were okay," he repeated softly. The mother kissed his forehead and smiled. "You did more than that. You showed the world your heart." As he drifted off to sleep, the boy thought about everything that had happened. The plane ride, the passengers, the flight attendants, and most of all, the moment he had spoken up for his mother. He understood something important, that courage was not about being loud or strong, but about speaking honestly and standing up for what was right. He also realized that his actions could inspire others, even if they didn't know him personally. The next morning, the boy woke up early, stretching and looking out the window at the sun rising over the city. He felt calm and happy, remembering the previous day's events. He quietly wrote in his notebook, capturing the lessons he had learned, that fairness mattered, that honesty and calmness were powerful, and that helping someone you love was the most important thing of all. He knew he would carry these lessons with him for the rest of his life. The mother watched him quietly, her heart full. She knew that the boy had not only grown in courage but in understanding and empathy. She realized that his bravery had not been a single act, but a reflection of the kindness and thoughtfulness he carried every day. She felt lucky to witness it, and even luckier to be the person he had chosen to protect first. As they prepared to begin the rest of their visit with family, the boy held his mother's hand, feeling a quiet confidence. He didn't need praise or recognition. He only wanted to do what was right. And in that simple desire, he had already changed the day for many people. His mother, the passengers on the plane, and even himself. The journey had started as an ordinary flight, but it had turned into something extraordinary. It had shown the boy that even small voices could make a big difference, that fairness and kindness mattered, and that love and courage could be expressed in quiet, powerful ways. And though he was only 8 years old, he had already proven that the smallest person could have the biggest heart. As they stepped out into the sunlight, ready to embrace family and new adventures, the boy glanced back one last time, remembering the plane, the passengers, and the moments that had taught him so much. He smiled softly, knowing that the lessons he learned that day would stay with him forever, guiding him through life with honesty, courage, and a heart full of fairness.